Hi, I'm the kind of man who believed in forever, loyal, simple, blind. I followed my fiancée one quiet evening, thinking I'd surprise her. Instead, a child ran into her arms, calling her mom. And just like that, my world split open. But that moment, it wasn't what broke me, it was what came after. The lies, the family secrets, the years I spent building a life alone. Now I ask myself every night, was any of it ever real? Or was I just the fool in their story? I left the office earlier than usual that Friday. The sky over Seattle hung low and heavy, the kind of gray that made every streetlight look like it was glowing through fog. My coworkers were still bent over their desks, half drowned in blueprints, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel guilty walking out. I had something better to do. Or so I thought. I'd spent all week planning a quiet dinner. Marina had been working late lately, saying her firm had a new client who demanded impossible deadlines. And I wanted to surprise her. Nothing grand, just a table by the window, her favorite red wine, and the upgraded ring I'd hidden in my jacket pocket. A small gesture to remind us both how far we'd come since the years of living paycheck to paycheck. Traffic crawled as usual, but I didn't mind. I turned the radio off and let my thoughts wander. We'd talked about buying a house near Lake Union, maybe adopting a dog once things settled down. She'd laughed when I said I'd build us a porch swing myself. "You're too busy saving the world with glass and steel," she'd said. I could almost hear her voice when I parked near her office building. Soft, teasing, familiar. I leaned against the hood of my car and waited. The street smelled like coffee and rain. People rushed past with umbrellas, shoulders hunched. Then, around 6:30, the glass doors opened and Marina stepped out. But something felt off. No blazer, no heels, just jeans, sneakers, and a gray hoodie. She clutched a large canvas tote against her chest instead of her usual briefcase. I smiled at first, maybe she'd changed for a surprise of her own, but then she glanced around as if checking whether anyone was watching and hurried across the intersection. She didn't take her usual bus downtown. Instead, she boarded one heading south toward Rainier Valley. That wasn't her route. I hesitated. My mind tried to explain it away. Maybe she had an errand, maybe she was helping a friend. But a small, cold knot formed in my stomach. I followed. The bus ride was long, slow, and silent. I sat a few rows behind her, hidden under my hood, staring at the back of her head. She kept fidgeting with her tote, pulling out her phone once, then tucking it back quickly. Every few stops, she looked out the window like she was counting turns. When she finally got off, twilight had already deepened. I followed at a distance. The neighborhood was quiet. Small houses, peeling fences, lights flickering behind lace curtains. Not the kind of place Marina ever mentioned. She walked briskly down the block until she reached a small building painted blue and white, a daycare center. Before I could make sense of it, the door burst open. A little boy ran out laughing, with his arms outstretched. "Mom!" Marina froze for a split second, then crouched and wrapped him in her arms. The sound of her voice when she said, "Hey, sweetheart," sliced through me like a clean, quiet blade. My breath caught. I counted. The boy couldn't have been older than 4. Brown hair, just like mine. A small scar above his eyebrow. The same spot where I'd hit a table corner when I was 5. No, that couldn't be right. I stayed across the street, half hidden by the bus stop sign. The rain had started again, soft but steady, blurring everything between us. She lifted the boy, kissed his temple, and spoke to a woman inside the doorway before walking down the street. The child rested his head on her shoulder, murmuring something that made her smile. A smile I hadn't seen in months. My hand trembled on my phone. Every instinct screamed to walk away, to unsee what I'd just seen. But another voice, smaller, colder, whispered, "Don't jump to conclusions." So I followed again. She turned onto a narrow street lined with old maples, their wet branches dripping. Finally, she stopped at a small beige house with a sagging porch. The lights flickered on as she stepped inside. Through the window, I saw her set the boy down and hang her coat on the rack, like someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Then another shadow appeared, a man maybe in his 60s carrying a mug of tea. He handed it to her and she smiled warmly. They talked, close, easy, familiar. The boy climbed into her lap. It wasn't a fling. It wasn't a secret job. It was a life. I felt my knees weaken, the rain soaking through my coat. Every memory of us, the sleepless nights, the shared dreams, the The whispered plans crumbled under the weight of that single image. Still, I couldn't move. I watched until the window fogged from the warmth inside. She reached up, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, the same gesture she always made when she was comfortable, when she felt safe. Safe with them. My chest tightened. I raised my phone, hesitated, then took one photo through the glass. The boy, Marina, the older man, all framed in the soft glow of a home I didn't know existed. The shutter sound was almost inaudible under the rain, but to me it was deafening. I lowered the phone, staring at the blurred image on the screen. My hand shook as I whispered, "Who are you really?" That single picture, I didn't know it yet, would tear apart everything I thought was true. By the time I got home, the rain had turned to mist, thin, silver threads clinging to the sleeves of my coat. I kicked off my shoes, dropped the keys on the counter, and sat at the kitchen table without turning on the light. The apartment smelled faintly of cedar and coffee, but everything felt colder than I remembered. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo again. The screen's glow hit my face like a confession. Marina, the boy, and the older man, a snapshot of a life that looked complete, peaceful. Her smile wasn't forced. It wasn't guilty. It was the same quiet smile she'd worn the day I asked her to marry me. I zoomed in, looking for something, anything, that might make sense of it. That's when I saw it. On the boy's wrist glimmered a silver bracelet, just barely visible beneath his sleeve. My initials, SV. For a moment, the room vanished. I remembered losing that bracelet 3 years ago, the same year she told me she had to attend a conference in California. I had searched everywhere, torn the apartment apart looking for it. She'd teased me then, saying maybe it was a sign I worked too hard to notice what I had. Now I realized she wasn't joking. I tried to breathe, but each breath came sharp and uneven. I forced myself to think rationally. Maybe she'd found the bracelet later. Maybe she'd donated it. Maybe the boy's father shared the same initials. But deep down, my heart already knew the truth. If that child was mine, why hadn't she told me? I opened the drawer beside me and pulled out an old photo album. It was something I hadn't touched since she moved in. As I flipped through, I found a picture of her at the beach. Sun hat, sunglasses, that same ring she used to wear before she said she lost it. I zoomed in on the reflection in her glasses, and there it was, a small toy car on a bench beside her. The same model I'd built as a kid, a Ford pickup, hand-painted red. I felt my throat tighten. My phone slipped from my hand and landed on the floor, face up. Notifications glowed across the cracked screen, but I didn't care. I opened the browser and typed her full name, then her maiden name. Nothing. Then I remembered something she'd once said, half-jokingly, when I teased her about privacy. If I ever disappear, I'll do it under a new name. I searched again, this time using her middle name and the city. There it was, a private social page under the name Marina Vale. The profile picture showed the same house I'd seen tonight, a man's arm around her shoulder, the boy between them, smiling at the camera. Caption, "Our little miracle, Eli." The post date stopped me cold, and 4 years ago. The same month she told me she'd miscarried. My hand clenched before I knew it. The next thing I heard was glass shattering, my phone thrown against the wall. I didn't even remember doing it. The sound echoed off the empty kitchen. I didn't cry. I'd cried enough for people who lied while looking me straight in the eye. I sat there for a long while, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, trying to steady my breathing. Every thought came like a tide. Disbelief, anger, grief, crashing, retreating, crashing again. I could have driven back, could have confronted her that moment. But rage was useless without truth. So I waited. The next morning, the sky was pale gray, still dripping from the night's rain. I went back to that daycare, the one where the boy had called her mom. I told the front desk I was looking to volunteer for community outreach. My voice didn't shake. It surprised me. The woman behind the counter smiled kindly. "We always need extra hands. Miss Vale's son goes here. Eli, right? Sweet kid. His mom works part-time at the library." My stomach twisted. I asked, pretending to sound casual. "She's a single mom?" The woman nodded. "Yes, strong lady too. The father left before Eli was born. She never talks about him." I almost laughed, but the sound caught in my throat. The father left. That's what she told them. That's what she built her story on. I thanked the woman and turned to leave. As I reached the door, I heard small footsteps. A child's voice behind me said, "Hey, mister!" I turned. Eli, the boy, stood there, holding a crayon drawing. "You dropped this," he said, even though I hadn't dropped anything. I crouched down. "Is this yours?" He nodded. "It's me and Mom. And, I think, Dad." He pointed at the stick figure beside them, tall, with a square jaw and short hair. "She says he's far away, but nice." I swallowed hard. "He must be." He smiled, the same shy curve of lips Marina had when she was nervous, and ran back inside before I could say another word. When I got home, I placed the drawing beside the photo on my desk. Under the lamplight, the paper shimmered faintly from where his small hands had pressed too hard with the crayons. A family of 3, the same 3 faces from the photo. No more doubts, no more questions. I stared at both images until my vision blurred. My voice barely came out when I whispered, "You're mine." I reached for my phone, the screen now spider-webbed with cracks, and dialed her number. My thumb hovered over the end button, but I didn't press it. The line clicked. Then her voice, soft, careful, said, "Hello?" I said nothing. Through the faint static, I heard a small laugh, the boy's laugh, bright and alive. And that sound broke whatever silence was left inside me. I didn't sleep that night. Her voice had echoed in my ear long after the call ended, calm, unsuspecting. And that child's laugh, light and pure, looped in my mind until the city itself seemed to hum with it. By morning, I knew I couldn't go on pretending. 2 days later, Sunday afternoon, I parked again across from her house. The same small blue one with the crooked porch light and the mailbox shaped like a little birdhouse. The street was quiet, washed in that soft Seattle gray that blurs the edges of everything. I'd spent the last 48 hours watching her pattern, morning drop-offs at the daycare, short grocery runs, the way she always double-checked the lock on the gate before going inside. Today she was gone longer than usual. The blinds were half drawn, a sliver of light cutting across the living room wall. My hands trembled as I stepped out of the car, boots crunching on the wet gravel. I hesitated at the gate, staring at the door that used to open for me without a thought. When I reached under the mat, my fingers brushed against metal. A key. She still hid a spare there, the same way we did in our old apartment. For all her careful planning, she hadn't changed this one thing. The lock clicked softly. The sound sent a shiver through me, not from fear, but from the weight of stepping into a life I'd once built, now belonging to someone else. Inside, the air was warm, faintly scented with lavender and ocean breeze, her favorite combination. My chest tightened. The space was small, but filled with life. A pair of little sneakers by the door, a basket of laundry half folded, dishes drying by the sink. On the wall above the couch hung drawings, scribbles of blue skies and stick figures with smiling faces. Then I saw the fridge. Bills, reminders, and colorful magnets framed a handful of photos. My eyes locked on one that stopped me cold, Marina holding Eli beside a hospital bed. A man stood next to them, his arm in a cast. His face blurred slightly from the glare on the glass, but I didn't need clarity to know. It was me. The label written beneath in her looping handwriting read, "Dad's First Day." I stumbled back, gripping the counter for balance. That photo was from 3 years ago, after my car accident. I'd been unconscious for days, and when I woke, she'd told me she'd lost the baby. I remembered her voice trembling, her eyes hollow. I'd believed every word, but she hadn't lost our child. She'd given birth alone. I sank onto the couch, staring at the walls filled with fragments of a life that had gone on without me. "She built a home without me," I whispered, "but she kept my shadow in every frame." The realization hollowed me out. Every sleepless night after the accident, every time she turned away when I said, "We can try again," all of it replayed with cruel clarity. "She didn't lose our child," I murmured, voice barely audible. "She lost faith in me." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, letting silence stretch until it felt like the air itself was pressing down on me. The anger that had once burned inside me now smoldered into something heavier. Regret. I thought of Eli's laughter, his drawing, that tiny hand holding a crayon too tightly. I'd missed birthdays, first steps, the sound of his voice saying "Dad" for the first time. The betrayal cut deep, but the years I'd lost, those cut deeper. I rose slowly, wandering toward the hallway. There were two doors, one slightly ajar. I pushed it open. A small room. The boys. The walls were painted light blue, dotted with glowing stars. A stack of storybooks sat on the nightstand, and beside them, folded neatly, was a blue scarf. My scarf. The same one she'd given me the winter we first moved in together. "So you don't freeze your heart out there," she joked. I reached out and brushed my fingers over it. The fabric was soft, faintly carrying her scent, and something else, the sweetness of a child's world. I felt everything inside me break quietly, not like glass but like old wood splitting. Slow, inevitable. A noise startled me. A car door outside, then footsteps on the porch. Marina's voice, faint but distinct, calling, "Eli, honey, don't forget your bag." I froze. The scarf slipped from my hand, landing softly on the carpet. The doorknob rattled. My pulse hammered against my ribs. There was nowhere to hide without making noise, nowhere to run without revealing I'd been here. I glanced at the photo on the wall, the one labeled Dad's first day. My reflection stared back at me from the glass. I didn't run. When the key turned and the door creaked open, I stood there, still, breathing slow, the blue scarf in my hands. I wanted her to see me not as the ghost she'd buried, but as the man she'd tried to erase. The door creaked open. Light spilled into the room, stretching across the floor like liquid gold. I stood frozen, the blue scarf still in my hands. Marina stopped mid-step. The grocery bag slipped from her fingers, and apples rolled across the hardwood, little thuds breaking the silence that had built between us for years. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her face paled. Then, from behind her, a small voice. "Mom, who's that man?" The question hung in the air like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. Marina turned slightly, her hand trembling as she rested it on the boy's shoulder. The clock on the wall ticked once, twice, and then the world seemed to stop. For the first time, I looked at my son without pretending. His eyes, her eyes, stared back at me, wide and curious. Not afraid, just wondering. I wanted to say everything at once. That I'd been lost, that I'd missed him, that I'd never been given the chance to be the man he deserved. But all that came out was a whisper. "You should have told me." Marina's breath caught. She stepped inside slowly, closing the door behind her. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. "I wanted to, every single day." Her gaze flicked toward Eli, then back to me. "But you almost died, Silas. The doctors said you might not walk again, that you might never remember me. You were broken. I couldn't make you choose between your life and ours." Her words hit harder than I expected. I remembered the sterile hospital room, the beeping machines, the fog of morphine, the days when I couldn't even tell if I was awake or dreaming. Maybe in some twisted way, she thought she was saving me. But the part that broke me most, she'd saved me by erasing me. Eli tugged at her sleeve again. "Mom, is he your friend?" She knelt beside him, voice gentle. "He's someone who used to be very close to me." The way she said it, past tense, stung more than any lie she'd ever told. I took a small step forward, careful not to scare the boy. My knees felt weak, my chest tight, but I crouched down until I was at his level. "Hey there," I said softly, forcing a small smile. "Do you like drawing?" He nodded shyly, clutching a crayon still stained on his fingers. "Yeah. Mom says my dad's an artist too." The words sliced through me like glass. My throat tightened. I swallowed hard, nodding. She's right. He must be a good one. He grinned, the same crooked smile I used to have as a kid, then ran to the table where a half-finished drawing waited. I glanced at it. 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a bright blue sky. The third one had a scarf drawn around his neck. Blue. I couldn't breathe. Marina's voice trembled behind me. "Silas, please. You shouldn't be here." I turned, and for a moment all the anger drained out of me. She looked older, not in years, but in weight, the kind people carry when they've had to survive alone. "Why, Marina?" I asked quietly. "Why didn't you trust me?" Tears welled in her eyes. Because your parents told me you couldn't handle it. They said you'd hate me for keeping the baby, that you'd see him as a mistake that ruined your future. My parents? I whispered. They said that? She nodded slowly. They said it was best if I let you go. So I disappeared. But I couldn't let go of him. Her voice broke. He was all I had left of us. For a long time, I didn't say anything. I just stood there listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the soft scratch of crayons behind me, and my own heartbeat pounding like a drum I couldn't silence. It wasn't anger that consumed me, I thought. It was the sound of my son's voice, calling me a stranger. When I finally spoke, my words came out low, even, "You should have trusted me to make that choice, Marina. You took that from me." She looked down, tears falling silently onto her hands. I know. I just didn't want to see you break again. I exhaled, the fight leaving me all at once. There was no villain here, and just two people who had been broken in different ways. Eli looked up from his drawing. Mom, can he stay? Her body stiffened. No, sweetheart, she whispered. He has to go now. Then to me, quieter. Please, Silas. He doesn't know who you are. Don't confuse him yet. Let me find a way to explain it right. I stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. My voice barely held together. But I'm not disappearing again. As I stepped toward the door, my fingers brushed against the scarf still hanging from my hand. I turned it over once before folding it gently. You can keep this, I said. Her eyes met mine. No, it's yours. I nodded slowly. Maybe it still is. Outside, the rain had started again. Soft, steady, unrelenting. Through the window, I saw Eli sitting at the table, drawing another picture. 3 figures again, this time with the third one holding a blue scarf. I pressed my palm to the glass, watching that small world I used to belong to. So close, yet unreachable. That night, I made my choice. Not to walk away, but to stay close enough to protect them, even if it meant watching from the shadows. I didn't go home that night. The rain kept falling, a steady whisper against the windshield, soft enough to blur the world, but loud enough to keep me awake. Across the street, the light in her kitchen flickered once, then went dark. I told myself I'd just wait until I saw the last lamp go out, just to make sure they were safe. But that night stretched into the next, and the next after that. Days folded quietly into weeks. Soon, I knew their rhythm better than my own. Every morning, Marina walked Eli to the daycare 2 blocks away. She always checked both sides of the street, one hand holding his, the other carrying her worn-out tote bag. Around 8, she'd head to the diner where she worked part-time, and by noon, she'd return home, shoulders heavy, but smile still intact, at least when she looked at him. From the driver's seat of my old truck, I became a part of their world, invisible but near. I watched, waited, protected. I left a new umbrella at their gate before the storm rolled in, tucked a small grocery bag on their porch when her pantry ran low, and once, after seeing the power company's notice pinned to her door, I called in the payment anonymously. It wasn't guilt that drove me. It was something quieter, the ache of wanting to be useful again. But one evening, everything shifted. She came home later than usual, her coat soaked through, hair clinging to her face. I could see her from the corner of the streetlight, exhausted, shaking, one hand pressed to her forehead as she leaned against the porch rail. She pulled an envelope from her bag and stared at it like it held the weight of the world. The next day, I overheard her landlord arguing by the mailbox. I need the rent by Friday, he said. His tone was sharp, uncaring. So I called him that afternoon, used a name that wasn't mine, sent the full amount. It felt right at the time. Quiet help, no strings. But the following morning, I saw her through the window holding a receipt with trembling hands. She was pacing, phone in one hand, panic written all over her face. Later that day, I heard her whisper to a neighbor, "Someone paid my rent. I don't know who. What if he found us?" Her words cut deep. He, she meant me. That night, I sat in the truck with my notebook open, the rain tapping the roof like an old metronome. I wrote slowly, my pen scratching through the paper. She used to know my handwriting. Now it just scares her. For a long time, I stared at those words until the ink bled through the page. I flipped to a clean sheet and wrote again, smaller this time. I'm a father who can't say the word dad. A lover who became a ghost in his own story. The next week passed in silence. I tried to keep my distance, but every path still curved back to her, to them. Then one afternoon at the small park near the daycare, I saw Eli running toward the swings. He was laughing, wind in his hair, until one loose chain caught and sent him tumbling. Before I could think I was already there, I caught him just as he tried to push himself up, his little face crumpling. Hey, it's okay, I said, brushing the dirt off his sleeve. You're all right, buddy. He looked up at me through teary eyes. You sound like my dad. The words froze me in place. By the time Marina rushed over, her breath short, she heard it too. She stopped mid-step, her face turning pale as the rain clouds above us. Our eyes met, hers wide with something between fear and recognition. I stood, backing away slowly. He's fine, I said quietly. Just scared. She nodded, speechless. That night, I couldn't bring myself to leave. From across the street, I watched her close the blinds, tuck Eli into bed, and sit for a long while at the table, her hand covering her face. When she finally looked up, Eli was there, holding the blue scarf, my scarf, wrapping it around his neck like it belonged there. It smells like home, he told her. And for once, she didn't correct him. The world outside seemed to shrink after that. People started noticing me, the same neighbors I'd waved to once as a husband, now avoiding my eyes. The man at the diner glanced twice when I lingered too long outside. Even the landlord looked suspicious, muttering to someone as I passed. I knew I was walking a thin line, halfway between guardian and intruder. Still, I couldn't stop. Every morning, I told myself I'd stay away, and every evening, I found myself back in that same spot, watching the light flicker in their window. Then, one Friday night, just as the street fell quiet, a soft knock echoed against my door. I froze. Through the frosted glass, I saw her silhouette, small, tense, shoulders trembling beneath her coat. When I opened the door, the scent of rain and lavender filled the room. Marina stood there, eyes red, voice barely holding steady. We need to talk, she whispered. Before this goes too far. When I opened the door, she didn't yell. She just stood there, soaked to the bone, hair clinging to her face, the blue scarf in her trembling hands. The same one Eli had wrapped around his neck days ago. You were never supposed to find us, she whispered. The hallway light flickered above her, throwing soft shadows across her face. I didn't ask her to come in, but I stepped aside. She hesitated, then walked past me, quiet, careful, like she was stepping into a memory too heavy to hold. The apartment smelled of coffee and rain. She looked around, her gaze landing on the scattered notebooks on my table, the same kind she used to steal from my desk back when I was sketching blueprints for a house we'd never finish. Why are you here, Marina? I asked, my voice low, controlled. She didn't answer right away. Her fingers tightened around the scarf. Because I can't keep pretending this didn't happen. Any of it. I poured her a cup of coffee, set it on the table. She didn't touch it. When she finally looked up, her eyes carried years I hadn't lived with her. Your father, she said quietly. He made me leave. I froze. What? She nodded. The night after your surgery, he came to the hospital. You were still unconscious. He said you needed to focus on recovery, not on me, or what he called my mistake. My hands curled into fists before I could stop them. He paid you to disappear. Tears filled her eyes, but her voice didn't waver. I took it, yes, because I had nowhere to go, but I never touched a cent after Eli was born. Every dollar sat in that envelope until I burned it. The room went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I stared at the wall, my jaw tight. You thought disappearing was love? I finally said. Her lips trembled. It was mercy, Silas. You almost died. The doctor said you might never walk again. You would have chosen us, and it would have killed you trying to prove you could still be everything for everyone. I shook my head slowly. You took away my right to choose. I know. Her voice broke. And I've paid for that choice every single day. We sat there, the rain drumming softly against the window. Years of silence pressed between us, heavier than words could fill. I looked at her, truly looked. At the woman who once made the world feel steady, and the stranger who'd learned to survive without me. We weren't victims, I said finally. We were cowards, in different ways. She closed her eyes, tears slipping free. Maybe that's true. For a moment, I thought that was the end of it, that she'd leave and we'd go back to our separate ghosts. But then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded paper, a hospital envelope, creased and worn. "There's something else," she whispered. Something I didn't know how to say. I frowned. "What is it?" Her hand shook as she handed it to me. "Eli's sick. He has a rare blood disorder. The doctor said the best chance for a match would be from his father's side. They think you might be the only one who can help." My breath caught. The room tilted slightly, the sound of the rain dulling into a steady roar. "You didn't come for me," I said quietly. "You came for him." She nodded, eyes glistening. "Yes, but that doesn't mean I didn't want to see you." For the first time, I didn't feel anger. Only something hollow, deep, and raw. I sank into the chair, the envelope still in my hand. "You should have told me sooner. I was afraid." "So am I admitted. But not for me." We sat in silence. The clock ticked, the rain softened. Then I looked at her, really looked, and something inside me steadied. "If I'm his father, I'll prove it. Not with words, Marina. With blood." Her tears came fast now. She covered her face with the scarf, pressing it against her mouth as if it could hold the sound back. When she finally lowered it, her voice was almost a whisper. "He sleeps with this every night," she said. "Says it smells like someone who loves him." I couldn't speak, I just nodded. She stood, wrapping the scarf around her shoulders. For a second, her eyes met mine, two people bound by the same regret. Then she turned and walked to the door. I followed her to the window after she left. The rain had turned soft again, silver against the streetlights. I watched her car pull away until the taillights vanished in the mist. Some truths don't destroy you. They hollow you out, so something new can grow. The next morning, my phone rang. A voice on the other end said, "Mr. Voss, this is Harborview Medical. The results are in. We need you to come immediately." I didn't blink. I grabbed my coat, keys still on the table, and walked out into the cold Seattle rain, because somewhere between guilt and hope, I'd already started to feel like a father. Hospitals have their own kind of silence, the kind that hums like an unanswered prayer. The air smelled of metal and disinfectant, sharp enough to sting the back of my throat. I'd forgotten this smell, the same one that lingered after my accident, after the days I spent not knowing if I'd ever open my eyes again. Now I was back, not as a patient, not yet, but as something else entirely, a man trying to understand what being a father meant after missing 10 years of his son's life. When I reached the corridor, Marina was already there. She stood by the window, pale and exhausted, her phone clutched so tight her knuckles turned white. The morning light cut through the blinds, striping her face in gold and shadow. "They'll tell us together," she said softly when she saw me. I nodded. Neither of us sat. The seconds stretched thin, the hum of machines filling every corner of the room. The door opened and a doctor stepped in, a calm man with glasses that reflected the ceiling lights. He held a folder close to his chest, his expression careful, deliberate. "Mr. Voss," he began, voice steady, "the bone marrow results are back." I swallowed hard. Marina's breath caught beside me. "You're a perfect match," he said. "Genetically, you are Eli's biological father." The words landed like a punch and a prayer at the same time. I sat down slowly, my knees suddenly weak. The chair creaked beneath me. My hands trembled as I pressed them against my face. 10 years, I whispered. 10 years, and I never knew I had a son. Marina didn't move. She was crying quietly, one hand over her mouth. I looked up at her, and for the first time in years, reached for her hand. It wasn't out of love. It was out of something deeper, shared grief. "We both missed his first steps," I said. "Let's not miss his next." She squeezed my hand once, wordless, fragile, before letting go. The doctor gave us time to breathe, then cleared his throat. We can schedule the marrow extraction tomorrow morning. It's a relatively safe procedure, but it's not a risk, I interrupted softly. It's a debt. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. We'll prepare everything. After he left, Marina turned toward me, her eyes rimmed red. You don't have to do this right away. I know it's a lot. I shook my head. He's my son. I've already lost enough time. She exhaled, a faint broken sound, and stepped aside as I went to the nurse's station to sign the consent forms. My hand barely hesitated when the pen touched paper. While waiting for the pre-op room to open, I stared out at the rain streaking across the windows. I could see my reflection, pale, older, quieter than I remembered. And behind it, my father's face flashed in memory. The same man who'd torn my life apart with his sense of control, who'd decided for me who I should love and who I should lose. He wanted me to live without attachments, I thought, but I'd rather die with them. Later, when they prepped me for the surgery, the doctor leaned down, his tone calm and procedural. Mr. Voss, if there's anyone we should contact in case of an emergency. I smiled faintly, though my voice cracked. Tell my son. His father finally showed up. He gave a small nod. We'll take good care of you. As the anesthesia began to flow, my thoughts drifted. Slow, weightless. Marina's smile flashed behind my eyelids, then Eli's laughter, high and unguarded. The blue scarf followed, fluttering like a memory through the haze. Every piece of my past, every loss, every mistake, they all blurred together into something new. Somewhere nearby, I heard the rhythmic beeping of monitors. I tried to hold on to the sound, to stay awake just long enough to remember why I was doing this. For him. For the boy who had my eyes and didn't even know it yet. Down the hall, in the pediatric ward, Eli slept under a blanket too big for him. The blue scarf lay folded beside his pillow. He stirred once, half dreaming, and whispered, "Dad's coming soon." Outside the glass, Marina sat in a plastic chair, head bowed, hands clasped around that same scarf like it was her lifeline. Her lips moved in prayer, silent, trembling, as if she was bargaining with the heavens for one more chance to make things right. The lights dimmed in the operating room. The hum of machines deepened. Then came the sound, urgent, sharp, of footsteps. A nurse burst through the door, her face pale. "There's a complication," she shouted. I woke up choking on a breath I wasn't sure belonged to me. The world spun in slow motion, machines humming in uneven rhythm beside me. Lights overhead flickered, not harsh, just distant, like I was being called back from somewhere far away, somewhere warm, where voices didn't scream and hearts didn't break. But Marina's voice did reach me, sharp, shaking. "Silas, stay with me, please." I blinked once. Then again. She was there, sitting beside me, hair pulled back sloppily, a blanket from the waiting chair draped over her shoulders. Her hands trembled as she reached for mine, and the touch felt like memory and fire all at once. "You scared him," she whispered, her throat thick. "You scared both of us." I tried to speak, but my throat burned dry as dust. A nurse leaned in, adjusting something near my nose, murmuring that I was okay, that the worst had passed. Marina wiped her eyes, and somehow, even with the raw redness in them, she managed to give me a smile. "The surgery worked," she said softly. "Eli's stable, you did it." But her eyes said more. They didn't shine the way they should have after good news. A doctor came in not long after, his voice careful, the way people speak when they don't want to make promises. "Mr. Voss, your marrow saved your son, but you experienced internal bleeding during the procedure. We managed it, but you're not out of the woods yet. The next 24 hours will be critical." I nodded slowly, chest heavy with the weight of that truth. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of not finishing what I'd just started. Marina leaned over me again. Her voice cracked open. "Please fight. For him. For us." I glanced toward the table beside me and pointed, gesturing for something to write with. A nurse handed over a clipboard and pen. My hand shook, but I scribbled one line. "If I don't wake up, tell him I never stopped loving either of you." She read it. Her lips trembled. Then she pressed her forehead to mine. Outside the window, the sky dimmed slowly into gray. Day bled into evening as machines kept time better than any clock. I drifted again, and this time I dreamed. Not of loss, not of pain, but of Eli, running through a wide-open field, arms stretched like wings, Marina laughing from a porch swing, sunlight catching her hair. And Eli, he wore the blue scarf, the same one from years ago, the same one I once thought was lost for good. He turned toward me in the dream, tugging the fabric up around his chin. "Dad," he said, his voice high and honest, "it's warm because you made it that way." In that dream, I smiled, and I cried. Even as the machines beeped steadily in the real world, my heart cracked open to make room for something I'd never known I could still feel: peace. I didn't know how much time passed, but when I opened my eyes again, the room was darker, touched by early dawn. A nurse stood at the edge of the bed, checking vitals. She glanced at the monitor, then leaned closer. "He made it," she whispered to Marina. I felt her body go limp with relief. She collapsed forward, forehead on my arm, sobbing in silence. When I finally spoke, it was only a whisper. "Where is he?" Her eyes met mine. "He's waiting for you." Later that morning, I stood on trembling legs, one hand gripping the IV stand. A nurse wheeled me down the hall to pediatrics. The door to his room was cracked open. I saw him first before he saw me, curled up under a fleece blanket, coloring in silence. When I stepped in, he looked up. His eyes were the same as mine. "Mom said my dad's brave," he whispered. "Is that you?" I nodded, words caught in my throat. "Yeah, kid, that's me." And that was it. No speeches, no fireworks. Just his tiny hand reaching for mine, and a silence that felt more healing than any apology. Marina sat on the other side of the bed, her fingers wrapped around the blue scarf. We didn't say much, but for the first time we were all in the same room, breathing the same air, feeling the same hope. Outside, the sun crept slowly above the horizon. Its light caught the scarf draped over the chair. That familiar blue, glowing like the morning sky, familiar, worn, but still warm. Weeks passed. Spring had crept in while we weren't looking. The cold edges of March softened, and for the first time in what felt like years, Seattle let a little light in. We'd left the hospital 3 days ago, but my legs still moved with caution, like they hadn't quite accepted survival yet. I didn't blame them. Eli's hand gripped mine as we stepped out of the car and into the courtyard behind my apartment. The garden was modest, a patch of earth tucked behind red brick walls and a creaky fence. Years ago, it had belonged to an old couple who grew hydrangeas and tomatoes. Now it was ours. He didn't ask if he could run. He just did, through budding dogwoods and half-buried stepping stones, his laughter echoing against the buildings like a bell. I sat down on the bench beneath the largest tree. It was still early, dew clinging to the grass, sunlight pouring in through the branches. Marina stood on the back porch, hands wrapped around a warm mug, watching us like she was afraid if she blinked it would all vanish. "Every day he gets stronger," I said quietly. She didn't answer, but her eyes softened. "Every day, I remember what I almost lost." Eli came bounding over, dirt smudged across his cheek, holding a packet of seeds I'd bought from the nursery. "Can we plant them now, Dad?" That word still shook something inside me. It wasn't disbelief anymore. It was awe. "Yeah," I said. "Let's start." He knelt down beside a raised bed, fingers eager and clumsy. I showed him how to dig a shallow line, how to sprinkle the seeds gently. "Will they really grow?" he asked. "Only if we care for them," I replied. He didn't say anything for a moment, just nodded. I knew he understood more than he let on. Marina had raised a thoughtful kid. When I looked up, she was watching us. Not with longing, not with sadness, just peace. Her footsteps were light as she walked over. She knelt beside me, and for a moment we just watched Eli push dirt over the seeds. She spoke softly. "You still wear your ring." I glanced at my hand. The band had dulled, scratched from years of denial and memory. I hadn't even thought about taking it off. "It's a reminder," I said, "not of what we lost, but of what it cost to find each other again." She didn't reach for my hand. I didn't reach for hers. Some things don't need holding to feel real. The wind picked up slightly. I noticed the blue scarf. Eli had tied it to the fence post earlier that morning. It fluttered gently, the fabric faded, but still strong. That scarf had lived many lives, once a gift, later a symbol of secrets, and now something simpler, proof that some threads can fray and still hold. We didn't rush back into love. We didn't even talk about what came next. There were no whispered promises, no illusions of what should have been, just quiet, just growth. Later that afternoon, Eli ran up holding a tiny green sprout cupped in his muddy palms. "Dad, it's growing!" I crouched down slowly, my body still stiff from the weeks behind hospital walls. I looked at the seedling, then into his eyes. "So are we, son." And we were. The three of us sat on that bench until the sun dipped low. We didn't need anything else. Just the warmth of each other and the rhythm of a world finally letting us belong. The scarf caught one last gust of wind, lifting like a banner, the same blue as the sky above us, the same warmth as the blood that now connected us. I followed her once out of doubt, but now I follow them, out of love.